everybody. Happy Tuesday. Happy New Year. I hope everybody celebrated fantastically and 2023 is off to a great start. So today, the first Get Live with Dracaena, we are going to talk about how sweet wine is made. Okay, because in the previous one, I talked about chaptalization. And I was like, that was really kind of a quick dive into a very specific thing. But during that chaptalization live, I did mention that the purpose of chaptalization is to allow fermentation to occur and to allow more alcohol to be created into that wine. And it was not meant to make a sweet wine. So I thought that a great follow-up would be for to see how we do make a sweet wine. So for those of you who missed it, right, the previous one is about chaptalization, and Jean-Antoine Claude Chaptal, he is the person who created chaptalization. And right, so the whole purpose of this is to not make a sweet wine, but to be able to get a wine that doesn't have enough sugar in it, or the grapes don't have enough sugar in it, in order to get more alcohol so that we can have more body, more mouthfeel, and that stuff. So we're moving away from Chaptal for this one, and we're going to talk about sweet wines and how they are actually made. Okay, so as a precursor, right, remember that if a wine is dry, all that means is that all the yeast have consumed all of the sugar that is in that fermenting juice, and that is why it is fermented to dryness. Okay, so that is the definition of what a dry wine is. Now, probably the most popular or well-known sweet wine is white Zinfandel, okay? And that is kind of a good thing and a bad thing, because it's kind of given a bad rap to rosé, to Zinfandel, to a lot of different types of wines. However, white Zinfandel was made completely in a different way than other sweet wines are. Okay, so we can also experience sweet wines in sauternes, with port, with sherry. Okay, and one of the other things is, like, when we think of sweet wines, even people who know what a sweet wine is, one of the problems is that we think Riesling. Okay, and Riesling does come in a sweet wine, but that's also kind of rough, because not all Riesling is sweet. Okay, so like this is Alsace, France, up in that corner there. Okay, and Alsace, France makes amazing Riesling that is dry. Okay, so if you want to give Riesling a try, but you don't want a sweet wine, look to Alsace. Now here's a little tip. Okay, if you look at the back of the label, now Riesling does do that kind of cool thing where they have that sweetness level on the back of it. But if it doesn't have that, what you can do is you can look at the alcohol content of the Riesling. And if the alcohol content is low, you can expect it to be higher in sweetness. If the alcohol level is higher, you can expect it to be lower in sweetness level. So there's a little tip, okay? So how did we get to sweet wine and it being basically thinking white Zinfandel is all sweet wine? It is thanks to this place here, Sutter Home, okay? So Sutter Home is really the reason why white Zinfandel made the craze. And the cool thing is that it was by sheer dumb luck, okay? Actually, it was a bad thing that happened in the winery that allowed white Zinfandel to occur. So during the 1970s, white wine was all the rage, and there was a lot of white wine being produced, but there weren't really enough white grapes out there. So a lot of wineries started making a rosé wine, which is making a white wine out of red grapes. And as they were doing this, they were doing the saignée method, bleeding that grapes, okay? And Sutter Home here, very large production, Okay, what they did was they actually were making a dry wine. They wanted to make a dry wine, but now what happened was a stuck fermentation. And that is not a good thing. What that means is that the yeast stopped eating the sugar. So all of that sugar was left in the wine. And now what Sutter Home did was they were like, hey, let's make this marketing ploy. We're not going to dump this. We can't fix it, or we're not going to fix it. What we're going to do is we're going to release this as a cheaper wine, and we're going to call this a white Zinfandel. And bam, it all happened. The white Zinfandel craze occurred, and it was out of control. So a lot of people call call sweet wines white Zinfandel. That's kind of like calling every soda Coke, okay? It's not the right thing to say. But this occurred because of an accident, because the sugar didn't get completely consumed. So that is one way that sweet wines are made, is by that sugar just not being consumed. And then since the yeast didn't consume it, the alcohol level is lower and the sugar, or what's called residual sugar, RS, is higher. So you get that sweet taste, okay? So that is how white Zinfandel is made. Now there are many other ways that we can get sweet wine. And the first place is one of my favorites, and it is in sweet Bordeaux. Okay, so Sauternes. So Sauternes is made in a completely different way. It's not that the yeast stop eating the sugar. Okay, what's happening is that Sauternes, which is an AOC in Bordeaux, and the thing is that this region has the two rivers. So you can see the two rivers, and they create this maritime climate, and it gets this mist in the morning. And what happens is this mist encapsulates the vineyards, encapsulates the grapes, and keeps it there. And then this very nice, and it's very rare I say this, but nice fungus starts to grow on the grapes, and it's called Botrytis cinerea. Okay, and what happens is the microscopic spores find their way into the grape, and then what happens is it starts to dehydrate the grape. So it starts to shrink in size, and what this does is it increases the concentration and the flavors inside the grape. So we have a grape this big with X amount of sugar in it, and now all of a sudden, because of the botrytis, we have a grape this size with all of that sugar in it. Okay, so that is how Sauternes is made. Completely different style of wine, completely different process of making the wine, okay, and a completely different flavor aspect. Sauternes is going to be honey and almonds and, oh my God, I love Sauternes, okay? So that is one way. Now, another style of sweet wine is, there we go, is port, okay? So port, only wines that are made in Portugal's Douro Valley can be labeled as port. So similar as only champagne can be made in Champagne, only port can be made in the Douro Valley. So this wine is made sweet, but in a completely different wine, a different style. So this wine is made by fortifying a base wine before it has been fermented to dryness. So now in previous ones, I talked about that, again, that stuck fermentation. If alcohol gets too high, the yeast then die off. Well, this is what they're purposely doing in port, okay? So they're going to allow the yeast to eat some of the sugars. They're going to get to a certain alcohol level, and then what they're going to do is they're going to add a distilled grape spirit, which is usually brandy, okay, to it. And what that does is it bumps the alcohol up and it shuts the yeast down and it leaves that residual sugar in there. So that is how port is made. Again, because of that style, it's going to be a very different flavor profile than that white Zinfandel, than the sweet Riesling, than any of those other types of wines previously. Now, similar to port, we have sherry, okay? So now sherries can actually be made in two different ways. But now, just like Port can only be made in the Douro Valley. Sherry can only be made in the Jerez Triangle, in the Sherry Triangle, which is what you can see here. Okay, so the other thing is not all sherry is sweet. If you want to try a dry sherry, you're going to want to try a fino or an oloroso style. Those sherries are dry. Now, sherries that are sweet, they can actually be made two different ways. They can either be made naturally, okay, which is kind of similar to the sauternes, right? We're going to naturally allow that grape to get sweet, or it can be blended. So in naturally sweet sherry, the fruit is harvested late, just like in sauternes, and it is allowed to dry in the sun. And what this does is it results in those extremely small berries that are full of concentration. All of that sugar in that little itty bitty grape. The second way sherry can be made is by blending. So these, like, you can get those cream sherries. And what happens here is that you start off with a sherry that's similar, right? You're going to allow it to go through its fermentation, and then you're going to add the sweet sherry to it. So either the Pedro Jimenez, which is also known as PX, or the Muscatel. Okay, these are the sweeter sherries, and you're going to add that to those other wines, the base wine, and that's going to be allowing you to get the sweet wine. Okay, so lots of different ways of making sweet wine. It is not all white Zinfandel. And just as a sidebar, Zinfandel does come as a red grape variety that is dry. Okay, so remember, if you are looking for a sweet wine, the alcohol content can give you a hint, okay, to whether or not it is a sweet wine. And don't get put into those circles of just saying, okay, all Zinfandel is white, or all Zinfandel is sweet, or all rosé is sweet. There are loads of sweet rosés out there. Dracaena Wines produces one, right? Ours is a Grenache Tempranillo blend, and it is fermented to dryness. So there is no residual sugar in there, okay? White Zinfandel is a rosé, but not all rosés are white Zinfandel. Also, expand your horizons. Try different sweet wines. Try the sauternes. Try port. Try sherry. And try the different styles of those wines. And you will find that there's something out there that you're going to love. Okay? So I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you next week. Please leave a comment, do whatever we do on Instagram to help share this. Okay, flag it, do everything you want to do. Please leave me a comment to let me know if there is another wine topic that you would like me to cover in the upcoming weeks. And, please follow us on Instagram and Twitter, and follow our YouTube channel. And, of course, check out DracaenaWines.com to see new things that are happening, because we got some exciting news coming up. We're going to have a tasting room in downtown Paso. So, hope to see you soon. Sláinte, Happy New Year.